What is the crack? I see Lorcan's here and keen as always, early enough. What's the bleeding story, bud? What do you be painting this evening yourself? Anything interesting on the table? I've got a few bits and pieces lined up. As those of you who know me probably already know, I've been mucking around with these clump foliage smoke markers and having a great amount of fun with them. So I'm going to be continuing to paint up one more of them that I have here. I've filled in bits and pieces of it that I wasn't too happy with some more clump foliage and sealed it in with like a 50-50 mix of PVA and glue. And we've got more people here. Squig Boss Mad Knobs is here. What's the crack, bud? Or can I say he's trying out one of those USB airbrush compressors? It's okay. Oh, okay. Right. So I take it there's no tank with it. It's just a direct feed. Yeah. If so, how are you finding that? Like that? Is it consistent with the feed, or is it like? Is it a bit more inconsistent? I suppose is the only really terminology I could be using. Definitely not a replacement for a proper one. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have thought as much. Like a double action airbrush with a compressor and then a tank attached to it. You know what I mean? There's not going to be much beating that in regards to consistency and a decent standard. You know, but it'd be interesting nonetheless. Like having something. Maybe some people don't have the space for a compressor, or maybe the price point. Like, what are the USB ones like? What's the price like on the USB one? Is it that much of a difference nowadays? Especially taking into account you can get compressors like at a reasonable rate. You know what I mean? They don't have to break the bank. I mean, you can go crazy, but that's the same with any hobby, really. You can go absolutely nuts. You can go bleeding mental on them. I was only in Lidl the other day and looking at, the way there's like the middle oils. So for those of you who are not based in Europe, it's a budget sort of grocery store. And there was a compressor. There was like an upright compressor, 80 liters, I think, was the capacity. And, you know, my inner hobbyist was tempted, but then the realist in me is like, I have literally nowhere to put this, and it would be noisy as hell as well. It really would. Walking is saying, yeah, the airflow is fine. It's decent pressure. It gets hot quickly, and the charge just lasts about an hour. You can use it for small batches of minis. Yeah, that would. Yeah, okay. So that would be my expectations of like a USB compressor. I didn't realize I had like a charge capacity. I thought it'd just be like direct. Gitman's here as well. We have Dim. What can I say? And he got a set from Amazon with cheap double action airbrush for like €70. Yeah, that's reasonable. Like good starter set, but you can get a compressor from Green Stuff World for 100 and an airbrush from them from 25. I got my first compressor from Lidl for 40, you think it was. Yeah, look, they do some decent stuff. They do rotary tools. So like if you want a budget um if you want a budget rotary tool, they're all right. Like they're not amazing, but they're not terrible. That tends to be the pricing on them. And then even for the likes of primers and stuff, you can get spray paint off them for like £5 a can or cheaper. You'll get like metallics and various other colors, blacks and such. Even like Stevo swears by the Pound World or Poundland spray paint, and that I think that company over here trades under the name Deals. So I've tried it. It's grand, like black spray paint for a couple of quid. It does the job, like, you know what I mean. No complaints from me at all. But yeah, that's what I've been mucking around with. As you can see with the clump foliage, I don't know if it's coming up great on the camera, but I've done one or two passes already with black. I think I've done one pass with black already, and it's just getting into those nooks and crannies and crevices, just to get a consistent black on it, to then paint up the smoke and fire. So eventually, as some of you have probably already seen, you'll have something like that, fire down near the bottom of it. But eventually this will look something like that. I like to put a lean on them as well, so there's like a gentle breeze. It's the likeliness of, smoke just going up straight, dead wind, isn't very likely. I've noticed that since I've taken up fishing, there's always some form of breeze blowing in one direction or another. So I've put a little bit of a lean on all of them. They're not just like straight up fires. Like when I'm making the armatures, it's the same across the board. Just sort of, I'll put a bit of a bend on it and then build up around the core, which I use staples now. I think the first one, this one's actually, the core of this is actually filament, 3D printer filament, but I decided to go with paper clips as something a bit like, it's sturdy enough. The amount of super glue I've used to glue itself to the core, it's sturdy enough, like. But yeah, I use paper clips now, and they're grand. They do the job, ourselves. What's everyone else working on? Not gonna say the best place for cheap spray primer in Dublin is the car shop on Capel Street. The car shop on Capel Street. I shall have to check that out, Lorcan, the next time I'm on a lunch break during the week in the city centre. I shall have a look in Capel Street. I do tend to frequent that street myself. Go up to Army Bargains or Dublin City Comics up the very end. But there's a good few stores along the way. There's like a DIY tool store, and there's a few different stores knocking around on Capel Street. Yeah, there's a few bits and pieces. There's a few music stores as well, like guys who do microphones and such. I remember I was trying to source a specific type of microphone before I bought the one that I have now, because, I try and buy locally instead of just getting stuff off of Amazon. Ideally, you know what I mean? Keep local businesses going. But sometimes it's just not possible. Maybe they just can't get the product that you're looking to get in, if you get me. So sometimes you are kind of forced to buy online either way. But yeah, there's a few stores knocking around. So the plan will be to paint this one up and then muck around a little bit with one or two other pieces. I was starting to experiment with explosions for different types. So I don't know why, but I've gone down this rabbit hole with the clump foliage. So we've got like smoke markers, fire markers, if a vehicle's set on fire. And I suppose the whole premise behind this being that I want to use vehicles in Battletech games. So we have the likes of our Patton or a Rommel tank here. Obviously this isn't finished being painted, it needs to be painted up a bit more. I'll probably put it on this camera, you can probably see it a bit better. So the whole idea being that, once the tank's destroyed, if you want to leave it in place, something that's a bit more visually sort of pleasing, if you get me, where it's been destroyed. That was the whole idea. I was like, I want to use tanks in Battletech, and then, sort of taking images of the battles. I thought it'd be cool doing smoke markers, and I've always wanted to do these sort of clump foliage bits and pieces with Stone Boys, but I never got around to it. But I've been experimenting as well. So I've done a piece like this. So this is sort of like an explosion marker, and thank you to Carter, one of our guys on our hobby hangouts that we do, Discord hangouts, was reminded me that like the center of an explosion tends to be brighter and getting it to plume out. So this pretty much looks like a starfish kind of, but it's basically like I got pieces of a paper clip and I bent them into this sort of shape and glued them together, and then built up the clump foliage around it, and then just painted up in the colors. So the whole instance of, say for instance there, how's the alpha tongue twister? An ammo hit. That's what I was trying to simulate. So the whole idea with this would be you'd place it on the tank, and it's supposed to, show, my tank's blown up this turn. And I think it looks all right. It's not too bad. it looks decent. It looks the part. That's a bit of fun. So I'll do a few more of them. That's the idea. Lord, can I say? And I got a set from him. Yeah. Gitman being busy painting up his Pain Boys and Death Dreads as well as Smashing Knob. Now I got some character models to paint up. Oh, so you're staying busy. Lorcan saying, did you see the photos of my finished magneted up gun trailers and trucks? I think I did. You did post up images of the Long Tom artillery pieces. I do remember you posting bits and pieces up. Well impressed. Fair play to you. I don't know if I'd go to the same extent myself. I haven't decided if I want to magnetize these because they pretty much come like cast with sort of a peg and a hole type of thing. But I mean, it might be good for putting effects on the tanks because the paper clips are metal themselves. You know what I mean? Like magnets will stick to them. So I could put some magnets in just to keep the turrets on without them falling off type of job. I just haven't decided yet, and I have a load of magnets, so it's not the end of the world either way, if you get me. But yeah, I'm experimenting with other sort of designs regarding explosions. So looking at artillery strikes, and it's mostly they're concussive, not so much explosive as the tank one. But trying to build up an armature. So this will be the sort of thing I cut out some Plasticraic, and then I build up the shape that I want using just like clippers with the paper clips, and get the shape I want, and then build up from that shape. So the next stage with this would be getting bits of clump foliage and super gluing them on all the way around and getting the sort of desired effect. So this one won't be the same sort of color. It'll be sort of I haven't quite decided visually how to represent it, but it's like when an artillery shell hits, it puts up plumes of dirt. So I'll have to try and get that visual effect across without it just looking like some weird sort of brown tree or something like that. Try and make it look like some form of explosion. I think I'll kind of have to cartoon it up a bit, with the explosions, the flames, the same sort of thing. Do this sort of fire at the bottom, maybe just a little bit at the bottom, and then do the explosions. Or I may do them the same sort of color as this instead of doing them a brown. I think brown visually won't look correct, even though that would be accurate. I think that's the toss-up I'm having at the moment with these things, is trying to be visually accurate to, your sort of visual expectations. You get me? Like, not many of us have been on actual battlefields and seen actual artillery strikes and such. So our expectations of what an artillery shell hitting the ground looks like will be sort of based off of Hollywood and action films and war films, and sometimes they don't use the correct effects, you know what I mean? So I haven't decided with that one what way I want to do the artillery shell strike, but I've got the base structure of it down, the shape of the explosion at least I have down at this stage, and then I'll decide what way to go visually with it. But it's fun. It's a fun little hobby rabbit hole I've gone down, and it's got the old creative juices growing, and I'm enjoying it. So it's win-win. It is definitely win-win. And I'll make a few of them. It'll look good for battle reports, having wreck markers, having knocked out mechs on the battlefield, or do some flares or smoke rounds, because you can do that in Battletech. You can fire off smoke rounds. So I might try and do some of them as smoke rounds. I was trying to think, how would you differentiate apart from just not putting the flames in? Would there be much need to differentiate? Maybe paint it up like a flare. The way you can do the flares, and you can have them in greens and reds and whites and such. Maybe I might do like a color shift, or even for objectives. Ideally for a flare, you would have it starting from a really small point and billowing out, probably. Um, and then maybe a bit of object source lighting at the very bottom to represent the flare in there. But I don't know. I'm spitballing ideas with smoke. Maybe I'm going into a level of detail that isn't quite required, but I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying the thought process, and it's fun. That's the important thing. I'm enjoying the process. Solvent abuses here. What's the crack, Dread? How are you, bud? We're painting up clump foliage, or orcs. Some people are painting up. You've gone down another rabbit hole. Dangerous territory there, Scar. It is indeed. God knows where I'll end up with it. But this is mostly due to a Gundam kit that I don't have to hand. That gave me sort of that has like some effects in it for tanks. So it's a combination of like a Zaku 2 and some tanks. And they have like this plastic piece that you can put under the turret to represent it being destroyed. And that's the reason why I started actually messing around with clump foliage again, because I wanted to do a diorama with some Gundam bits and pieces, but I got distracted with Battletech, which is a good distraction in my eyes, Enjoying the game. Definitely enjoying the game. Enjoying the gameplay. Enjoying the games I'm having with folks. It's a good crack. Enjoying coming up with colour schemes and such. Dread's doing good. Good bud. Painting Slanesh Cultist. No Machiner Krieger. Last time I remember watching some of your bits and pieces, you were doing Machiner Krieger stuff. You were doing some absolutely sweet dioramas. You're doing Slanesh Cultist. So you're doing that for yourself, or is it a commission, or what have you got going? And did you end up sorting out the garden in the end? I remember years ago you were attacking the jungle that was the garden and sorting it out. Many moons ago. I've been keeping myself busy with other hobbies as well, being out fishing while the weather was somewhat decent, and catching a few mackerel actually, which was good crack. I went out yesterday with my brother and my nephew. He's about 8. Just having fun fishing off of the harbour in Skerries, which is along the east coast of Ireland in Dublin, and caught a few mackerel. Yeah, it was good crack. Caught a few smaller fish as well. My nephew he's fascinated with fish altogether. So anytime I caught something small and it needed to be put back, of course he wanted to hold the fish and put it back, and fair play to him. He did. He enjoyed himself. Didn't catch any fish himself, but he enjoyed himself. That's the important thing. The brother didn't manage to catch anything either, but at least we came back with some fish. It was grand. It was good crack. Gitman is saying, when are you going to get a bad distraction such as 40k or Gorka Walker or God, Horus Heresy? Gitman, I'm not going to go near Horus Heresy. I can say that. Or safe bet, it is highly unlikely that you'll find me going near Horus Heresy. It's just I'm not into Space Marines. You know what I mean? I'm not. I mean, if you were a Space Marine player and you really love Space Marines, like Horus Heresy is perfect for you. I was looking at some of their tanks there while I was in the gaming store on Tuesday. I got a game of Battletech in with one of the local lads. We went to Underworld Gaming, which is out in Thailand. They have a selection of miniatures there. It was good crack. The lads out there are pretty sound. But yeah, we got a game of Battletech in, and it was a good laugh. It was definitely a good laugh, good time. And they had some of the Horus Heresy stuff there, so I had a perused while I was there. I just had a bit of a nosy just to see what's what and what's going on the Yeah, I mean, like some of the miniatures look good. Some of the tanks, they do look actually pretty good. But I've no desire to buy into it, you know. But that's the same for everyone. Everyone has their own sort of thing that they're into or that they're enjoying. So for me at the moment, the things that I'm enjoying are fishing and Battletech. That seems to be keeping me entertained to no end, which is good, you know. I'm enjoying playing Battletech to the point where it has me wanting to do hobby, which is which is a strange occurrence for me. I tend not to hobby quite a lot. But I think that's the thing for me is realizing I need to sort of enjoy playing the game. Whereas for different people, you know, different parts will be priorities for them. So like some folk like might be more into the hobby aspect of the game rather than the actual playing of it itself, if you get me. So if you can do conversions and rules for making up lore and such like that, if it gives you the basic tools to have like to be very creative, some folk might be really into that aspect and that gets them into the game. Or if you're really into lore, reading up all the lore that they might have for a gaming system, that might inspire people to want to play a game. Then if there's some really nice lore, they might fall in love with a faction, or they really like the sound of these guys and how they play and the story behind them. Like I like that about the hobby. There's not just one sort of avenue for inspiration or one sort of avenue to get you into a game. It might be a case of I like the core mechanics. I like how the game plays. You know, I'll play this game. Or I like how the miniatures look. Or there's a lot of freedom of creativity. Or, you know, painting wise, you're not very restricted. It's very open in that regard. So there's a lot of different avenues, and I like that. And there's a lot of different war games as well at the moment. Like, we're all spoiled for choice. There's quite a few war games out there. Whether you're into historicals or fantasy or sci-fi, like there seems to be a bit of something for everyone out there. Probably too much choice at this stage, uh, which is good again. It's a bit of a double-edged sword because you need to you need to find other people who want to play the same game, and there's so much choice now that you know, we can only play so many war games or so many games or board games, and you know, it's the same old issue of time, having the time. Um, in my mind, I think realistically, like to myself, my own capacity, maybe 2 or 3 war games, depending on how committed I am to specific war games. Like I still have my 40k stuff. I haven't given up on it. I just haven't been inspired at this moment in time to want to hobby and get hobby done. But that's because I haven't really been playing 40k. I'm sure that'll change. Like when I get a few decent games at 40k under me belt, you know, I'm sure that will inspire me to want to paint more miniatures or do some conversions. But it's just like I'm just going with the flow at the moment. That's all. Wherever the hobby inspiration is taking me, that's where I'm going. And it seems to be painting Battletech stuff and making explosions and smoke markers. That seems to be where it's taking me at the moment. Which is fine by me, because painting any miniatures is better than not painting miniatures at all. Get what I'm saying? Where you're not going to get a bad... Yeah, Gork and Walk now. Solvent the saying, Gardens work in progress is getting into the GW at the moment. Plan on playing Necromunda soonish. Ooh, very nice. Any specific gardening you're thinking of, Dread? Earthman Brick. Oh, well, I didn't know you had a channel. Yeah, I have a channel. It's just I hadn't been too heavily inspired to actually do much on it. Distractions, you know how it is. Life gets in the way at times, and if you're not inspired to sort of do hobby, there's not really much. Yeah, if you're not doing hobby, there's not really much to show on the channel. Unless, of course, people wanted me to start showing videos of trying to fish off of harbours and being unsuccessful or along rocks. But I don't know. You know what I mean? I think people sort of, when you subscribe to a hobby channel, you expect it to be about like hobby. You just don't really... I wouldn't expect people to be too enamoured. I mean, you could probably do some crossover. It's like, here, watch this video where I use old metal miniatures as fishing weights. Let's see if we catch anything. Yay! I mean, you could do that sort of stuff, but that seems very sort of niche, if you get me. Get me in the same. Well, you do now, Brick. Yeah, welcome to the King of Battletech. I wouldn't say that, Jude. I appreciate the sentiment, but I wouldn't say the King of Battletech by a large margin. I wouldn't say anything like that. What's Dim saying? He's saying Horse Heresy has a better system than 40k 9th edition, but that's a very low bar. But yeah, Space Marines, I doubt now that Horse Heresy is under GW's roof rather than Forge Worlds, that will remain as hobby friendly though. Well, look, that's just the way of it, man. You know what I mean? Dread's had a channel longer than all the other war bosses, I believe. Look, saying, yeah, 3 games is fairly sustainable. Mark and I used to juggle Battletech, Hordes Machine, and Drop Zone. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Lorcan. I was thinking that myself, being realistic about it. It's like, if, you know, how much time can you put into specific hobbies and get, you know, get the satisfaction out of it? Like, how much time am I investing in a specific hobby, and how much enjoyment am I getting for that time? That's how I've started to sort of think about war games that I play, like the investment time wise that I'm putting in and the enjoyment that I'm getting out. Is it worth it for me anymore? And then it's like, if yes, then grand, I'll keep plugging away at it. If it's not, then it's like, well, where's my time and my money better spent? You know, like fishing. I took up fishing last year. I started fishing, and like the price point getting into it isn't too bad. You know what I mean? It's like any hobby, you can go crazy, but more importantly, it sort of gets me out and about. But at the same breath, like playing BattleTech, I've been to, I think I've been to 3 tournaments now with BattleTech, playing BattleTech. So getting you out and about as well, meeting new people, making new friends. You know what I mean? Keep myself busy. Very, very active with the Battletech. It's been very enjoyable. Like, I've enjoyed the Kickstarter. Enjoyed the social sort of gaming that we set up. Anyone in the Dublin area is more than welcome to come along to our next player meetup. It's this coming Thursday in the Clonsilla Inn. Yeah, it's good to see it. Like, we've got a good group going. We've got a steady number of people there as well. Fair few folks getting games in. New people to the hobby. Old people. Old, you know, more venerated players, shall we say. Not just old people, but people who used to play it years ago coming back. Now that there's a bit of a scene starting to rise up again. It's good. It's nice to see. And a bit of variation for folks, you know. There's different games to be played, which is always nice. What's them saying? Why paint minis when you can build more and just add to your pile of victory? Well, this is the fun thing about Battletech. I don't have to build them. I can just buy them. Yay. Video of you fishing, Battletech voiceover. Totally doable. I think if I did like a fishing video, fishing Battletech video crossover, I'd probably like try and print some so instead of like these fuel containers for terrain, I'd probably try and print like some drop ships, some small scale drop ships, and use them as like floats or something like that. Like, I have thought of like, how would you Battletech and fishing crossover, how would you pull it off type of thing. And I thought, I've thought that may be a way to do it. Maybe not using old school miniatures as metal miniatures as fishing weights, but like some of them get absolutely battered and gnarled. I like that. Adds a bit of character to the old fishing weights. They do get battered. But yeah, good crack. Who's saying what here? Dread was saying, I've got quite a few to paint, bro. Oh, geez, you're keeping busy. There's a lot of crossover with fishing and miniature, says Airtman Brick. Most of the techniques I've learned have come from how my dad makes his fishing lures. You know, now that you're actually saying it, it's like, yeah, there is quite a craft to people making their own fishing lures. Maybe that's part of why I'm sort of like drawn to it. I like that sort of having to fix or make things. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a whole aspect of making up your own sort of fishing rigs, and that sort of scratches the same sort of itch for me that assembling miniatures kind of does. If you get me. I mean that's a whole rabbit hole itself. There's different types of fishing. So people doing like fly fishing will sit there and make their own flies and stuff. So I can see the allure of that. All right. I definitely can. Making your own lures and reels and stuff. Well, not your own reels, but your own lures, and then catching something with your own lures. You know, that'd be cool. But it's again, it's like it's a creative outlet. Like, you know, you can buy stuff directly yourself, or you can make stuff from scratch if you want. Like I've seen people where they buy hooks and then they get Kit Kat wrappers, the silver foil off of a Kit Kat wrapper, and then you know just they make their rigs from scratch that way, and you know, now that you say it, it did remind me quite a lot of, you know, sitting down and super gluing and gluing stuff together and making things, and getting the end result you want. So it's that sort of making things or fixing things or repairing sort of stuff type of vibe. I like doing that sort of stuff anyway, trying to fix things or messing around with the car. You know, like I've only serviced the car once or twice before, but you know, I find enjoyment in that sort of thing where it's you're changing air filters and spark plugs and oil filters, and you're taking the oil out and that sort of thing. That's a bit of crack. I haven't done it in a long time, but you know, just sort of the act of doing it. It's kind of therapeutic. It's that same sort of hobby craft that I find we tend to have when you're making things or you're sitting down and painting them. You know, you go into that sort of zen state. I introduced my brother to painting miniatures a good while back, and we haven't done it together in a long time. But that's what he liked about it, was that sort of your mind goes away from any issues that you're having, and you go into that sort of zen state where you're concentrating on doing what you're doing and not so much concentrating on, you know, the worries of life. Not that he has many worries, but you get me. It can be that sort of hobby for people, you know. Are the underneaths of our tanks painted? If not, they should be. I'll be saying crossover content doesn't tend to work too well. Me and Steve-O haven't done any of them movie vids in a while for a reason. I actually quite enjoyed them movie vids that you and Steve-O did. They were good crack. Modelling for advantages here. I'm going to assume it's Kaiser or Johnny B. What's the crack? Looking at saying, yeah, YouTube's algorithm wants you to do one thing and one thing only. It really does only want you to do one thing. Stephen Cross is here. What's the crack, Stephen? Thank you for joining us. Watching that drop ship, I want an Easter egg now. Yeah. There's quite a few people, actually, now that you say that. There's quite a few people in like Battletech groups. They'll post up anytime they see any sort of eggs, plastic eggs. Like there tends to be sort of like plastic eggs that contain, they're like lucky bags or lucky dips. I used to get them as a kid. One of our aunts used to buy myself and my brother these lucky dip bags where it's like it's like an A4 sort of paper bag, and it'll be full of little toys and trinkets. So you'll have like puzzles and like pencils or little coloring pencils and those slide tile puzzles, if you remember them. They're like square, and there's, you know, it'll be like 5 squares across or whatever, and you have to slide it to get it to reassembled, like kind of like a jigsaw, but it's stuck on rails, kind of. Um, yeah, so people are forever posting up in Battletech groups where there's those sort of they're that sort of lucky dip type of uh, product, but they're in Easter eggs, pretty much plastic Easter eggs, and they're sizable. Like, and there are actually some drop ships in Battletech that are egg shaped, pretty much. Um, and I haven't seen a decent one pulled off myself yet, but people are forever talking about buying them on the cheap and then doing conversions themselves, which would be sweet. I mean, maybe years from now I'll go down and do a drop ship, but there's no point in talking about what I will do. It's sort of I've learned that with 40k. It's like just talk about what you're actually doing. You know, what you'd like to do and what you actually do in life tend to be, two different things. Seems to be the life lesson I've learned regarding hobby and life in general. Someone is saying it's warm this evening. My painting lamp's cooking me to be glad when the winter's here. Airman Brick saying cosplay and miniature crafting has created a lot more options for boat groups, like the versatile nature of EVA foam and various techniques. It's funny you say that, Airman Brick, like, because I do, like, anytime I do come across how people make cosplays, and they're using foam, there's a lot of the sort of crafting techniques. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like they'll be using their Dremel to Dremel angles down, or some of them use hot wire cutters for stuff, and different types of adhesives that they'll use as well. Like I'm always kind of interested in how things are made, or how they're fixed, or maybe what type of adhesives they'd have to use for like EVA foam if they wanted to glue a material directly to it, and then put rivets in, or something like that, or clever ways that people will get around the problem, like how to design a piece of armor, and then how you're going to actually put it on and off without compromising the look of it. I always like that sort of thing. Or people who make like gauntlets. Anytime I see a video of someone making gauntlets and stuff like that, I always find that very interesting. I mean, I've no desire myself to dress up, or do the actual cosplay itself, but like the crafting side of it is yeah, I find it very interesting. But I'm always that way inclined. Like it's always interesting when you can see different hobbies and look at them, what their end product that they tend to produce is, and the techniques that they may use construction wise, and the different tips and tricks that they'll use for a hobby. And it could be any hobby, like, and you'll learn something. There is, I guarantee you, there'll be at least one thing, and usually quite a few tricks that you can tuck under your sleeve for your own hobby. You know what I mean? Like, I have a kayak now, and for fishing, and I'm looking at it going, oh, I'd like to mount different bits and pieces on it. Like I'd like to put a fish finder on it, and I'd like to change different containers and stuff. And then it's like there's a bit of hobby crossover there, because I bought some milliput, like, you know what I mean? And we're used to using milliput for sculpting stuff, and mucking around there, but like it also has other uses like boat repairs, you know what I mean? So there's hobby crossover across the board. I'll be wanting to fill in gaps that somebody else who previously owned it had something mounted there, and maybe they sealed it with something else that's perished now, but I'll come back in with, like, maybe I'll use milliput, or maybe I won't, or maybe I'll be able to fill it and then sand it back and then paint it a different color or whatever, you know what I mean? But there's always some form of hobby crossover. Or even like the other couple of weeks ago, I think it was last month even, I used a micro pipe cutter. So there's like a pipe cutters for cutting copper pipe. That's what its original use is for. Or even like a little junior hacksaw for cutting up Plasticraic and stuff like that. But I used those tools for what the tools are actually usually used for, which was cutting copper pipe, and installed a new I installed a new tap out the back garden so we could have access to using a hose or a power hose, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. You'll be surprised. You'll pick up skills from different hobbies, and you'll be able to apply them to various things throughout your life. You know, it can be very helpful. So if someone's giving you crap about, you're putting miniatures together, what are you going to learn from that? There's quite a plethora of skills you'll pick up that you'll be able to apply elsewhere in life. So if I say in Battletech fishing with Plasticraic, the Carpellan skirmishers, get out. Just you're barred. You're barred. Someone stop him from putting comments in the comment section anymore. You're barred, Zoe. Stephen Cross said, yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that Zen German weekend. Was painting some tanks for Battletech myself. Yeah, it's getting into the zone is good. It's like everything, small doses tend to be healthy for you. One of the folks on the Discord printed them out for me. Oh, nice. It's always good when you know somebody who has a decent printer. Trying to use one yourself, like I'm not too enamored with resin printers at the moment. I just don't have the space, but it's always nice if you have someone, if you have a friend that has a resin printer. It's always handy to have someone. It's like everything in life, you know what I mean? If you're building a house, it's always good to know an electrician or a plumber or, something along that lines. And then having a skill yourself where you can give each other a dig out. So if you don't have a resin printer, but maybe you have something else that you're good at, maybe you're good at painting miniatures. So you could, give each other a dig out. He's like, I need a shed load of miniatures painting. It's like, well, it's funny you say that. I have some tanks that need printing. And the world of barter. What more could you want? But yeah. Looking forward to getting all these painted up and getting them into a game. I haven't tried vehicles in a very long time, but I reckon it'll be interesting. It'll be a good laugh. Salvin is saying it's always good to combine hobbies, painting and smoking a bit. Go well, and you find quite a few people when they're doing different hobbies will smoke a bit as well. Dread, they will. It's not surprising. That's sort of that chill sort of. You get into that sort of zone, that sort of peaceful chill zone. Quite a few people do. Grey Primers here. Hi. What's the story, Nick? How are you? Yes, I was quite pleased today that I discovered another feature for like an online store that I'll have coming in the future eventually, which actually makes it functional, which was good news, Nick. Good news. Being able to actually get bits and pieces to work eventually, but it's top secret down the line. We've talked about doing more. We've talked potential solutions. Might be a thing in the future, but in a slightly different form. True. It'd be good. Like I did enjoy the videos, like, so do them, like, have another bash. I know not everyone who's subscribed to a channel specifically for one type of content isn't going to want to watch. But then I suppose it depends. People are subscribed to folks' channels because they like the individual themselves. Like you can make videos about bleeding anything then, and they'll more than happily watch. But I think that's not the majority of people. I think the majority of people specifically subscribe to a channel for content of a specific type. It's to be expected. I mean, like, there's nothing worse than subscribing to a channel for hobby miniatures and then they totally change and they're doing like bodybuilding or something like that. It's like, I mean, fair play to you, but it's not, it's not my cup of tea or something. I don't know. Or can I say he made a mech scale union out of a hamster ball? Nice. Have you the printer to make your dropship with? Yes, I do have a 3D printer, Lorcan. It is also, it's in a state of disrepair. It needs to be repaired. My problem is lack of space at the moment, and being distracted tends to be my folly. But, we'll get around to it. Airman Brick is saying leather rotary hole punches are ideal for crafting wood. I tried a leather rotary craft or a leather rotary hole punch. I tried one of those hole punch tools back in the day with Plasticraic, and I just didn't like it. Like it was an absolute pain in the ass to use. It just got clogged up, and then trying to get the rivets back out of it. It was like a star. Yeah, I'm sure you all know, but it's like having a star here, and you can change the size of the punch, and then punching through. But then I found like constantly doing that with your hand was a pain in the ass, especially for the amount of rivets that I wanted for like orc projects that I would muck around with from time to time. Would need quite a few rivets in them. So I just found like styrene rod and just sort of chopping it up tends to work best. I know the finish isn't as consistent, but for what I was using it for, it was ideal. You know, the sort of the orc look, that ramshackle look. It did what it needed to do, so I wasn't too bothered. There's different ways of doing things. You know what I mean? There's more than one technique to approach any aspect of the hobby. And there's no like right or wrong way. It's just finding what way you like doing things that you're comfortable with and is it efficient for you. And then off you go, like fire away. Someone was saying, you see folks are losing it over the new jet bikes at G-Drive and crying it's not real. It's now I've managed to miss the drama altogether, Dread, regarding jet bikes, thankfully. I've been too distracted making giant plumes of smoke, which are coming along very nicely. That's already sort of dried up a fair bit. I'm going to put a bit of black around the base and then I'll actually start attacking it. Now, how I've been painting these previously, maybe it's been incorrect. So, what I had initially done was I'd paint it black, yeah, and then any of those sort of like crevices down the bottom, not so much up near the top, because my thinking being that, you know, the fire's at the bottom and there's smoke generated at the, you know, even smoke starts at the bottom and then works up, and then obviously the fire isn't the whole height of it, but I wanted there to be a bit of, you know, a few flecks of fire or whatever going up. Now, how I was painting that effect initially, I was starting with some of these Vallejo game colors paints. I was doing like starting off I was using hot orange as the base and then just coming in with orange fire after that, but I started to come in with a bit of moon yellow then just as bright spots. But talking to other hobbyists, it's like really like the bright parts should be the deepest recesses. So when I'm going to do the fire for this one, I'm actually going to invert it. So I'm going to do yellow first, then the orange, and then like the final highlight of like hot orange as the red, if you get me. So like the brighter aspects are deeper in. If you kind of look at these ones, you can kind of see it's mostly orange and then it goes into a yellow. So that's kind of the wrong way to do it. But I mean, it still looks decent. Looks decent for what it is. It's just sort of like a smoke fire marker. It's not too bad. I'm quite happy with the end result, to be honest with you, especially for like a forced attempt. This foot does not want to stand. There we go. Like, yeah, this was the forced attempt. That's not bad going at all. I had a rough idea of what I wanted to do. This tank explosion, that was totally like pissing in the dark. I had no idea. But I think it looks good. Maybe I wouldn't do it as long the next time. See the way I have these sort of spikes coming out a fair bit? I wouldn't do them as much. I wouldn't do them going out that far, maybe. That's the only thing I'd do different. I quite like it, so I'd probably do another 2 or 3 of them. And I could do quite a few of these smoke markers. Maybe do like 10 in total or something like that. I don't know. It's quite fun. It's kind of therapeutic. You don't have to think too much. You're just sort of stabbing a cheap paintbrush into it and getting the end result that you like. Like, I find it looks really good. The effect looks decent. Like, for the amount of effort that goes into it, I don't think it has any right to look as good as it does, in my opinion. Now, obviously, other people may not think it looks as good, but for me, I was quite surprised. I'm like, holy crap, I can actually pull this type of thing off. You know. Airman Brick saying later, rotary hole punchers are ideal. They are indeed. Grey Primer saying, I'm much more comfortable using power tools in the real world since I started doing more dioramas and kit bashing. Ah, yes. Yeah, but there is that sort of effect as well. And using rotary tools, you know, I noticed made me a bit more comfortable wielding an angle grinder. But like some tools, it's hobby tools kind of help you to it a little bit, but then the power difference kind of like makes a big difference. Like one of my cousins gave me a length of a drill for drilling into concrete. So like your bog standard hand power tool drill isn't gonna cut the mustard. I think it's like an SES drill or something like that. But basically, it's a drill that has sort of like pneumatic action in it, but the thing itself is bulky and huge. And the drill bit, it's like a concrete drill bit. It's a drill bit for like going through walls of houses pretty much, and like holy Jesus, the power behind it is it's respectable. You know what I mean? So it's I get that the hobby crafting builds a little bit of confidence, all right, but you know, it works up to a certain point, if you get me. You know, when you're using big circular saws or you're using big drills, I think what happens is you realize, well, I found this myself, I realized the power difference. It's like, yeah, I better not mess this up because you could like lose a couple of fingers or seriously damage something or someone, you know. So that extra caution, maybe that's just me, but I found that hilarious. But you know, I got the job done. It worked well. It did what it was supposed to. And now we have a new tap out the back that works. Yay! So win-win. But yeah, definitely hobby tools definitely help with the crossover. You're right there. Airman Brick saying, yeah, a guy now has 10k followers and only started his channel 2 years ago. It's entirely Blood Angels focus. Fair play to him. I mean, 10k in 2 years. That's good numbers right there. Fair play to him. Layer hole punches are better for cardboard than plastic. I think you're right there. I think I learned that the hard way myself. Tim. It's kind of ironic that making rivets is not riveting. You and your terrible puns in my comment section. Someone saying the effects you're working on look sweet, by the way. Thanks, Alvin. Thanks, Dread. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm surprised, man. I'm rather surprised at how easy it is to make these and how good they look for what they are. Like, you know, it's literally just a fishing weight glued to a paper clip on a little plastic base, and then it's a load of sponge, coloured sponge, glued to it, sealed and painted. You know, like it doesn't look like sponge at all, but it's absolutely great. And if anyone's looking to do this sort of thing themselves, you know what, actually this might be a great tool for holding it up without touching the table. Let it dry. Oh, maybe if its center of gravity wasn't so bad, it might do that. Oh, there we go. If you're going to build these, go for the clumps. So there's different types of it. Like I found foliage clusters. So I bought like Woodland Scenics from a hobby store in the city centre, Mark's Models. I keep forgetting the name of the street. I think it's Hawkins Street. There's a great little sort of sushi place on the corner there as well. But go for the foliage clusters if you're wanting to do the smoke, because they're in bigger lumps, so you can kind of pull them apart yourself and break them down. Whereas if you start with smaller ones, I've found like they were very bitty and disintegrate easier. So if you're going to do like the smoke effects and such, go for the clusters, foliage clusters for them. I do have tubs of other bits and pieces, like this is like bushes and such, he says as he knocks it over, whatever. But as you can see, like looking at the tube or the tub, it's a lot looser. Do you get me? So it's a lot more broken up. But this is fine for terrain because eventually I'll want to make trees for doing woods. So that's why I brought uh, different colors. I want to do heavy woods in a dark color and light woods in a lighter color, just so you can visually differentiate in a glance. That's very sort of important for me for Battletech when I'm playing a game. Is there has to be a visual difference between different bits and pieces, and that you're able to tell sort of intuitively just by looking at it what it is. So, heavy woods are different from light woods, but I don't need to explain that to you. You'll just sort of know yourself from looking at them. And it was the same with some of the buildings that I designed and printed up. It's like there's different heights to them and different levels. And it was really sort of important design-wise when I was designing bits and pieces that you would be able to tell the levels. So like as soon as I said to you, this is a level one building, well then what height is that one beside it that's twice as high as it? Your brain would automatically be like, oh, that's a level 2, and then the next one up's a level 3, you know what I mean? That's the sort of design I was going for when designing things. So it's sort of that intuitive sort of being able to figure things out at a glance. Once one little element of it is explained to you, then you're able to realize the rest yourself. That's the sort of design aspect I was going for. Like, that's a level 3 then, because it's three taller than a level 1. That's, get what I'm saying? I'm sure you get what I'm saying. These are bright folks around here. Plenty more smarter than me, anyway. Who was saying what? How do you make the smoke markers? Well, we start off with some plastic, and we super glue down some paper clips that we've gotten our little snips to. I really do need to make a video on how to make these, don't I? I really do. I've been putting it off. But yeah, DIY snips, El Cheapo Jabbo. Just bend them up and glue them down. So that's what that is. That's just super glue. I have to say, when it comes to super glue though, when you're gluing these together, I've found a sort of a medium. So a medium super glue. So not one that's not a gel super glue, but you don't want a super glue that's too liquid either. You want a super glue with a bit of viscosity into it. So a medium super glue, I found that's been really helpful when gluing them together, especially when it comes to the clump foliage, because I tried using like just other super glues I had knocking around, like this one here. This super glue. I tried using this one, but this one is actually too sort of watery. It's not viscous enough. Like there's not enough viscosity in it. It flows away too quickly. Whereas a medium sort of super glue will stay on the clump foliage and be, or stay on the paper clip, and you'll be able to stick the clump foliage down. So if you're gonna be building them, use a medium super glue if you can find it, or maybe even a super glue gel. But I always find super glue gel takes way too long to dry. So a medium super glue if you're gonna be building them yourself. And then yeah, build an armature and then just glue your clump foliage onto it. Let that set. Then you coat it in like a 50-50 PVA glue sort of mix, or white glue, polyvinyl acetate. I used to always think the A meant adhesive, but apparently not. So polyvinyl acetate or white glue or hobby glue or Jesus, whatever people call it. One of these jobs. It's like a white glue. Like a 50-50 mix, half this, half water, and then coat it. And you're sealing it in because it's sponge so it doesn't absorb too much paint, and then just paint it, and away you go. And I definitely think at this stage I need to do a video on it. I've been too lazy. And then yeah, just having fun trying to make like the little effects, like the exploding turret, and then this one's going to be an artillery shell, and then I'll make some smoke markers, and I'll try mess around and see if I can get like a flare effect. So like a flare at the bottom with OSL and then smoke coming up, and then yeah, I'm trying to think, is there any other sort of explosions or fires or smoke effects that I potentially want to use on the battlefield? I mean, of course, there's always the sort of the rocket launcher type of effect. That could be doable, or you know, on the miniatures themselves, like the jetpacks, like the elementals for the game, they have this sort of smoke effect already themselves. So you could do that for a mech. Just sort of what I do there is I do the same sort of thing. I just sort of I'd drill up into the base with the paperclip and drill it up into the miniature, and then just build up with the clump foliage, and you'd get the same sort of effect. You could do it with Storm Boys as well. I'll probably muck around and try and experiment doing it with the Storm Boys. And now, obviously, if I was doing it with Storm Boys, what I'd want to do, especially, it's the same with Jump and Mix. So, this is the base of it going as a fire. Now, if I was doing it as a Storm Boy, I'd have it so that, like, the flames are at the top, and I'd actually colour the whole thing instead of just having smoke here, if you get me. And then I'd, just glue it to a base or whatever. But yeah, I'll give that a bash as well. I might actually do that. That might be fun to try it out on one Storm Boy when I'm doing it. It'll be a bit of fun. Do it on a mech, maybe a Storm Boy. Try have something launching a rocket or something like that. I think that would be really cool. Effects wise, you could do a missile attack. That would look sweet. Maybe even magnetize it. You know, there's loads you could do with this basic concept. There's loads of fun you could have with it. And it's just sponge. You know, so much hobby value and entertainment. Just mucking around with sponge. Who would have thought? Like, Lord, can I say? And I like that there's sort of two stages of the explosion. Yeah, it looks cool, man. Most of the hobby is easy technique. It's just because it looks good doesn't mean that it has to be achieved with difficulty. I think that's the thing that really surprised me, Dim, is that it doesn't. The end result, in my mind, has no right to look as good as it does for the effort I put into it. You know what I mean? It's surprisingly easy to do. Do columns of smoke, block line of sight, trees building? If so, as the height can go unlimited. You could. I think smoke markers go up to like level 2 or something like that. But basically, you can actually do that in Battletech. You can lob, like, say, if my mechs were advancing from this direction, if I like put smoke down on hexes that intervene, it'll help with like line of sight. So if my little sort of my commandos are advancing up, and I've got my catapult in the back here, and he lobs some smoke for them, you know what I mean, that they can use as cover going across. All tons of fun and ideas. You could do that sort of thing. Be nice tactically to do. I like that though, you know, you can have a bit of fun with it. What options you can make up tactically and use it the way smoke's supposed to be used. Pennies work well and bottoms gives them weight. That's true. That is very true. I was messing around with these guys. So I was using sort of fishing weights, but that's only because I had them knocking around and I was trying to think to myself, you know, how would I weight the bottom? Initially, I didn't want to use pennies for the likes of these guys' bases. So I tried to keep it small, and then the footprint, like covering the edge. I tried to keep the footprint small because I wanted to be able to put on smaller tanks as well, if you get me. Like some of these little, some of these smaller tanks, they don't have, like if that was a penny, it would overlap a lot more. Whereas I wanted the base to be smaller on these so I can put them on the vehicles and it wouldn't look too big. Do you get me? There wouldn't be too much overhang. But yeah, totally, like if you're doing smoke markers that are just going to be on the table, or you're doing markers that are, you know, objectives or explosions like this one, I could totally have used a penny. You know what I mean? That's about the right size. It's about I don't even have any change around. Oh, hold on. Yeah, there's like a 5-cent coin. Yeah, it's about this. You know, you could easily substitute a 5-cent coin for that, which is what, about, yeah, or a penny or whatever. A penny's a little bit smaller, but yeah, you could easily substitute that. And then the base, as Dredd has said, like the base will then be like weighted, which is handy, you know. So there's a lot, like I said, there's no one way of doing things. There's loads of different ways of doing things. So if I was asking AC5 level 1, level 2, AC20 level 3 for smoke rounds, no, you fire them from like LRM launchers. There are rules for smoke, but only default. They're 2 levels tall and count as light woods. Nice. What can I say? In the Aries, tripods carry LRM5s, and it's very useful to carry smoke rounds instead of explosives because they're tall enough for super heavies to hide in, while woods aren't. See? Thinking tactically outside of the box. You know? Or, you know, dropping smoke in front of your enemy to make it harder for him to shoot as well. There's a load of different tactical knickknacks you can be doing. That'll be a bit fun. Right, so I think this smoke, this one, is dry enough now. We'll try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to muck around. I have no idea if this will work well. I mean, if it doesn't work well, I'll just like repaint it black. But what I tend to do is I've previously, like I've said, I've gone with like hot orange first, and then orange fire, and then at the very last I've done like moon yellow. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try it the other way around, because the hotter parts of the paint job, so to speak, should be at the core of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess around with that sort of core being the brightest, and I'm just using an L battered Winsor Newton special value. Jesus, look at the bleeding state of that. Still going though, because I'm just stabbing sponge with it. That's what I'm doing. So I'm going to start with the yellow, and I'm going to do it sort of in the base, in and around cracks and crevices. And then what I tend to do once I've done the fire effect is I'll come back with the black, and I'll tidy it up a little bit. And it doesn't take an awful lot of paint. I'm not even going to water this paint down because it's yellow. Just trying to get decent coverage with it, if you get me. But yeah, it looks good. So, stabby in there, sort of. Down along the bottom, mostly starting off. And then 1 or 2 bits going further up. I'm trying to have it at the base of the fire as well. Probably could have done with a bit more there, but whatever. And then just as it gets taller, it's like maybe I might have 1 or 2 bits up here, but the majority of it I wanted to be down in this sort of bottom third. So there's a gap there. Might have to fill that gap. It's a bit bigger than I thought it would be. Come back in with more sponge. But I'm not too worried. This sort of, if I overlap too much, I'll come back and fill it. This nice part here. So all in here will look good. Trying to get into the deeper parts, and the higher raised parts will be the smoke. If you get me. If I'm getting that in shot. There we are. So having the fire being down in here. Ideally, I should actually probably prime it in grey instead of black. Maybe, I don't know. I'll mess around with the techniques. I'm sure some of you are watching and thinking maybe I'll do things a little bit differently, but it's a bit of fun. And just sort of paint it up like so. Like I said, I'm mostly going to be focusing on the bottom third of the smoke. The old smokestack, because that's where the fire is going to be. Once the vehicle's knocked out. And, you know, they're not always on fire, but if you're taking pictures of your battle and posting it up, you know what I mean, visually it'll look nice. Even if the vehicle hasn't been destroyed. You know what I mean? Because I've noticed that with take a lot of pictures when we're playing Battletech, and some nice sort of visual display of what's going on, of the action beyond just the miniatures being static beside each other. I thought would be nice, you know. If you get an ammo hit, maybe have like an explosion coming off, or I've been thinking about how to do it for mechs. Like if you get an ammo explosion, maybe you could have a piece. Like I've been trying to think of how to do it, because yeah, you'll have like your mech, yeah, And what I've been thinking on how to pull off an ammo explosion would be like if you had two pieces. What have I got spare that's sort of maybe suitable to sort of represent what I'm talking about? If you had two pieces, here we use some trucks. Oh, there we go. Look, this is one of the GHQ. I think it's a German truck. I can't remember off the top of my head. I just bought some trucks for objectives and such like that. If you had like one of these clump foliage bits, right, but it was in two, and then you had a magnet, right? I was thinking maybe to sort of show an explosion coming out the chest and out the back at the same time. If you made that sort of clump foliage pieces and then they just sort of slot together, magnetized together like that, so you'd have it sort of, if you get me, you'll have like the explosion coming out the front and the back and engulfing the mech, and then it'll be usable across different mechs then, you know what I mean? It's not just the one type of mech. I don't know. I've just been roughly thinking concept wise how to pull it off, how to get around it. Great Primer saying, I swear by super glue accelerator sprays now. I would as well. I have some. I do have some. But I just don't use it that often. I definitely like the fact that they give you this sort of pump spray head. I never use that. Anytime I use this, I unscrew it, and the bit of plastic that's in it, I'll use it as like a pipette and just drop it to where I need to use it. Because spraying this stuff, whew, it's not ideal to be spraying it around. Orkin is saying, I have a mech firing a Thunderbolt missile that uses one of the armor cast weapon effects. Those weapon effects look really nice, Lorcan. I do like them. They do look sweet, but I'm thinking maybe I can sort of pull something like that off myself and just, just for the fun of it. You know what I mean? Dread saying, for sure, seeing your plan. For wire armatures, instead of just using paper clips, ring binder wire and Allen hex keys work a treat. Hex keys? I suppose, yeah, if you had enough small ones. But, for me, the way I was thinking was it's cheap enough to get, like, a box of 100 or whatever. It's not the end of the world. I suppose, like, there's coating on paper clips, so they're not 100% ideal, but they're easy to bend as well. There's a bit of strength in them, and you can still sort of manipulate them with your hand, which is the reason when I went for paper clips. But, yeah, like I said before, there is no one way of doing things. There are several different ways to come up with the end effect. This is just the way that works for me. Gubbin Skits, what's your opinion on having that guy list for that guy? I mean, some people will be that guy no matter what. If that person is sort of established as being that guy and he wants to play that way, I mean, you can always fight fire with fire, that's up to yourself. But for me, it just depends. Like, will I have enjoyment playing the game would be what I'd be asking myself beforehand. Like, the hours that I'm going to invest playing that guy with, a cheese list, am I actually going to get enjoyment out of it? Like, what's my end goal here? Am I going to enjoy the game, or am I just trying to teach the guy a lesson? Because for me personally, trying to teach someone a lesson, it wouldn't be worth it. I wouldn't get enjoyment out of it or whatever. You know what I mean? For me, I wouldn't bother sort of engineering that scenario to get revenge or whatever. Not that I'm trying to sound better than people or anything like that, but it's just, I'm more, I don't know, maybe I'm just more conscious of my hobby time and trying to get maximum enjoyment out of it for myself. Selfishly. You kind of have to be selfish, I suppose, to a certain degree, where it's like, what games am I going to play? Am I going to enjoy them when it comes to the hobby? I don't want to be driving to a gaming store that's like maybe an hour away and then playing a game that I may not enjoy. It's like, it's a lot of time and effort in my eyes, but to each their own. Smoke markers would be ideal for making rocket boys for 40k. Totally, Storm boys all the way, man. I'll muck around and you basically reverse it. I'd do rocket boys, and then I suppose if you're doing like rocket packs for stone boys, you could do some object source lighting and of the uh, have the glow of the rocket pack sort of on the miniature itself. Like obviously at this stage it looks bleeding, it looks shocking, you know. But it's about building up layers, you know yourself. Building up layers, building up the smoke, building up the effect that you're trying to pull off. I suppose this would be a lot easier if done with an airbrush. You could sort of pre-shade these sort of recesses. You could come in with a grey and pre-shade them with a grey and then go over. You know what I mean? And leave the upper parts dark, if you get me. Because what I'm trying to do is build up the light from the inside out, which makes sense once you do it, but it looks weird. Like my wargaming brain does not compute. It's like, oh, darkest on the inside and then lightest on the outside. You know what I mean? But it was pointed out to me that for fires and explosions and such, it will look better the other way around. So I'll do one or two up here, like a deep one in there. Yeah, I'll do up in there, and then I'll do maybe another one or two sort of up there, sort of, and then I'll leave the top third altogether, if you get me. I don't want to do too much because the yellow can be a bit overpowering visually. But then we're going to be building up back in with the other oranges and such, so I'll do little bits there. And then what I always find is the very last step when you hit it with the grey that actually ties it together really well. Surprisingly well. It ties together very nicely. And they don't take too long to do either. Like, maybe they do take longer than I'm sort of consciously aware of, but I'm enjoying doing it. So it's like anything with hobby. You know, people may ask you how long did it take for you to do something, and you might be like, I don't bleeding know. But, you know, you tend to lose track of time when you're enjoying doing hobby. You just get sort of lost in it, and that's what's happening to me with these sort of smoke markers. It's something I always wanted to do for Stone Boys for a really, really, really long time, and I just never felt the motivation to do it, to get that part of the hobby done. But Battletech has sort of rekindled that desire to muck around with this sort of stuff, and you know, I'll dig out a couple of the Storm Boys as well while I'm at it, and I'll have a bash and see what comes from it. Oh, there we go. There's a nice crevice we can fill with paint. Whoa, dirty. Yeah, so see at the very depths, that's the problem I'm having now because it's in black. Basically trying to fill the bottom of it with paint. So maybe grey going forward won't be a bad idea, actually. Sort of pre-shading these. Or sealing them a bit more. But then you don't want to lose too much detail. But they're coming out alright, like. The coverage isn't actually that bad. I'm not really watering down this yellow. So going straight over a black, like, the coverage is actually alright. This paintbrush is absolutely knackered, but you know, I use it for PVA and just I'm not too nitpicky about being tidy with it, you know. I'll come back in and knock a lot of this back eventually, but yeah, that gap needs a filling, ideally. Right. I think that looks alright. Doesn't look too bad. Getting the desired sort of effect. I think that's enough. height wise. I'll knock a lot of that back to black there, but sort of trying to focus on the bottom third and the sort of middle portion a little bit there, but in general I'll try and keep the very top of it as smoke to sort of represent that the flame is at the base of it. So the flame is here and it's flickering up a little bit there, but the main column of it is smoke. Yeah. So I'll move on to the next color, which is this sort of orange fire, which is aptly named in my opinion. BC is saying, how about some small bits of ferrous metal actually glued and overpainted on the mech like they're part of it, and then make some small spawns and mannequin explosion markers? You could do that. You could actually do that. That's not a bad way to go about it as well. If you buried some magnets into the mech itself, and then just glue, you'd be able to sort of bloop, you'd be able to have you know, if you put an explosion on the back or whatever, then you'd be able to just magnetize it there, or magnetize the explosion there, or whatever, or even wherever its ammo bin is. That would be quite clever if you put a magnet on the bottom of that, or you don't even need it because it's a metal paperclip. But if there's wherever the ammo bin is, you could sort of countersink a really small. There are some really small magnets. You could countersink a small magnet in, and then just sort of. Maybe visually it'd be easier to understand with this. You know, if you take your ammo hit and it's in wherever it is, he says with a Black Knight, which has mostly got lasers, I do believe. I think this is a full laser. But like, if you had an explosion and then obviously have a star coming out like that one, you could do that sort of thing, you know. That'd be cool. Fun little experiment for the future. Like I said, just having fun with it. Right, so the orange. We want the orange to come in on the same areas, but just not as deep down as where the yellow is. So the very depths of it, we should try and keep yellow. And the orange will overbrush or whatever. Like I said, I'm using the most bog standard battered brush. Something I don't mind beating the snot out of. You know what I mean? Maybe I've made it a bit too watery. And just sort of coming in on the edge bits first and leave the very depths of it, that yellow. Very core of it, that yellow colour. And just sort of stab it in or dab it in, or if you get what I'm saying. Sort of over brushing a bit. I'm being very generous with it now, but not going too bad. So because we've one more stage of painting with it. We're going to be doing the hot orange after this. So this is just sort of the initial sort of stage. Bit of orange there. Is your wallet ready for the next Kickstarter? Asked Gubbins Kid. I don't think anyone's wallet can be ready for the next Kickstarter. I think my wallet is still traumatized from the last Kickstarter. I went a bit crazy, but you know, a bit of fun. But I am looking forward to it. I had a few issues with the Kickstarter this time around, but I'm, you know, quite happy with Catalyst. They sorted out all my problems. They sorted any bits and pieces I needed fixed. They were very good in that regard. Catalyst, they did sort out some issues I had with the initial sort of shipping and stuff, but that was fine. But with me, you know what I mean. And taking into account, you know, when it happened, you know, we were in the lockdown and, you know, factories shutting down in Asia and all sorts of global shenanigans went down. But, you know, we all, in general, I think, got our Kickstarter bits and pieces, which is good, you know. As I said before, we're just trying to dab into the areas, but we're trying to leave the very sort of deep parts as the yellow. We're just dabbing the orange onto the upper sort of areas. And it doesn't matter too much if there's a bit of mixing, like the yellow might still be a bit wet and it, you know, it just sort of blends a bit. That's not the end of the world. You don't have to be too precise with this. It's just a sort of a general effect that we're going for. We're trying to make it look like fire that's burning from the inside out. And if it's not perfect, it's not the end of the world, but you know, it wouldn't be bad. I mean, at this stage, this kind of reminds me of like a lava. If you were doing this on a base, maybe this wouldn't be a bad idea. You know, black lava and then the sort of molten in between sort of thing. You could probably apply a similar sort of application or premise to painting up some lava or lava bases or something that way inclined. I mean, you don't have to go too mad on the base. You're not really going to be seeing it. It's more when it's standing up. And, you know, once you've gotten the paint on, I mean, ideally, I should probably varnish these. Give them a bit of a varnish. But even still, like, they're pretty sturdy. They're mostly, like, super glued together. So they're mostly super glue and sponge. So they're pretty sturdy. What the longevity is going to be like on the tabletop, I don't know, but I'm mostly going to be using them as markers and such. They're not going to be too bad. And worst case scenario, if they do die horribly or go missing or get knocked and such, they're not going to be too hard to replace. You know what I mean? They really aren't. They should be alright. Be a bit more generous in there with the old orange. And just tap it into wherever we've been with the yellow. Even the very depths as the yellow colour already. I think that's the coverage for that colour done. Now, like I said, it looks weird now, but once we finish doing all of those colours, we'll knock it back a little bit. So the very extreme ends of where those fires are, I'll knock it back a little bit, just with the surface primer black. I'll knock that back a bit. And then the very last sort of step what we're going to be doing is we just give it a light sort of dry brush just with surface primer grey. That's just whatever I had to hand, whatever sort of grey you have. That's what I was attacking it with. So I'm going to shift it over to hot orange. You can tell I turned the autofocus off. I'll give that a bash now. And we're just going to repeat the process. So we're just barely sort of going back into the same areas, but we're not going as generous as we have with the previous sort of application. So I'm not even going to bother diluting this down, to be honest with you. Just sort of come back in and apply it a bit. The upper raised sort of areas more so. I mean, the colours are so similar that you know what I mean? They're not too far off. The more sort of upper areas, they are slightly different. Orange wise. I'm just dabbing it in. Don't have to go too crazy since this is the final sort of highlight. But definitely the upper sort of areas. The outer most layers. We don't actually need quite a lot at this stage. Be very sort of sparing at this point, sort of less is more type of vibe, if you get me. We are applying paint, you can see there. It's just it's so close in colour to what's already been put on. There's not too much in the difference, but it does, visually it looks nice once it's all sort of tied together. You'll really sort of, it's one of those type of things, if you've ever painted something and while you're going through the process of painting it, it doesn't look too great, but then when you get to like the last couple of stages, the last 1 or 2 stages, it really visually ties together. So you'll see that now. Once we do that, once we do the final sort of highlights, or when the grey is done really. So what I'll do is, I'll probably leave it at that. I don't want to go too crazy. We'll knock this back now with a bit of black. We'll come in, even when in some of these areas in here, we'll knock this back with a bit of black. And that'll be it for the fire effects. So that's what we're looking like now. So yellow, brightest colour is at the core, and then we're working our way up to the oranges. We're going to knock that back a little bit now with the black. Be very sparing now. Don't go too crazy. I'm going to switch the brush because this isn't really that precise. I want something a bit more precise, and I'm not even going to use the point. I'll use the flat of the brush, the edge of it, to paint on. I have this Army Painter Wargamer Monster brush for years. Nothing special. It's just a brush to use. Taking most of that off and just probably watered it down a bit too much. Yeah. Go back in and another little drop. And just knock it back a bit. Taking most of it off. We don't want to hit too much. So we do want to hit some of it, but we don't want to hit too much as well. We don't want to kill too much of it off. And then just sort of pull it back a bit. Just a little bit in there. That one's nice. It's tidied up well. So here as well. Just trying to do the sort of the upper parts of it. Knock back the edges just a little bit. You don't have to go too crazy. You're really at this stage now, we're just sort of, we're getting it to sit back in. Because we've got the paint on the edges, it's sort of very proud, very pronounced visually. And look what we're doing here. We're just barely sort of getting the edges, and we're just getting it to sort of sit back into the smoke. Don't want to go too mad on the black, but just get it to sort of sit back into it visually. And then what will happen then is once this black has been put in, when we do our final dry brush of grey, then it'll all sort of tie in visually. Yeah, do a bit here. Like, look how little paint I have on it. Like, I took that paint application and then I'm just using the side of the brush, and I'm just barely putting black on. You don't want to go too crazy. Just getting it to sort of sit back into it on the raised, very most pronounced sort of areas. Get it to go back in. I mean, if I put this much care into me painting me mix, you know, they'd look amazing. But I don't know what it is. I enjoy painting these guys. I enjoy painting this smoke. It just, on the end sort of effect. Sorry if I haven't been keeping it focused. And if there's a specific sort of spot that you're not happy with, you can always come back in again with your oranges, and if you make a mistake, come back in and readdress the issues. Any issues you sort of crop up with. You know, it's a very sort of forgiving technique, if you get me. And just due to the sort of the way it is, there's a bit of chaos to it, but you want it to look tidy as well, you know. So we're just knocking that back a little bit with the black. Just tidying those edges in, sitting it back into itself. And then once that's done, we're just going to hit it with a dry brush. And I think we're at that stage now. I think that's enough. I think that looks all right. Especially this side. I think this side looks nice. Right. So now that we've gotten the black done, okay, I've only barely sort of knocked the edges of the stuff back in, but getting it to sort of the seat, yeah, you're just getting it to sort of rest in a bit. Like I said, visually it's still gonna look a bit skew-if. I'm rushing this a bit. Ideally, I'd want to sort of probably come back in, and where there's any voids in these sort of recesses, I'd come in with a tweezers and I'd plug them with some really small bits of clump foliage, like here and there and there. But like, I mean, I'm nitpicking at that stage. For me, it's grand. You know, the inner perfectionist, the critic. Happy little explosions. Right, and I'm just using, this is just a grey I have. He says he knocks it over, but this is just, use whatever grey you want. Just a grey. And then you're just using a bigger brush that you have. So I have, what's this? This is an L cheapo sort of flat brush that I have. And I'm not even going to water it down. I'm just going to load up the brush and then take it off, and then do a gentle sort of pass, and you'll see visually it'll change quite substantially. So in general, when it comes to the grey, I like to do a general application of it. So just a very sort of light application, and then I like to do a second pass. So I'm just trying to get coverage. Like the deepest recesses are going to roughly stay black. Like this, the texture of the clump foliage really does sort of dry brush up well. It really takes to this sort of dry brushing very nicely. And as you can see, like it just visually it ties together really well. Brings it all together. And you want to go easy now. You don't want to be putting way too much grey. You want a bit of grey on it. Nice light coverage. You're almost sort of like a dusting of it. And then what I would like to do now is the final part. Got a bit more grey. And then I like to concentrate on the sort of upper part. Or bits that are sort of sticking out a bit. If you get me. Make them a bit lighter, a bit more pronounced and lighter to sort of give it a definition from the rest of the smoke. So the upper parts, again, just using an old cheapo brush. And get the outer sort of extremities, or the parts sticking out the most. And then know when to call it a day, because when it comes to the grey, you don't want to go too crazy. And I think that's it. I think that's it for this one. I may come back in with a bit of black later on if I'm not happy visually. But roughly, that's how she rolls, you know. I might sort of put a bit more black in here later on, or I might just leave it, you know. Does it look the part? It's a bit different visually to the previous ones I've done because we've got the yellow on the inner part and the orange coming out. Whereas these ones are more sort of orangey, if you get me. You can see the difference. Maybe knock back the yellow a little bit more. But overall, I don't think it looks bad. What do you guys think? Does it look like a tank on fire? I think it looks the part. Now, so there we are, folks. You've been shown how to paint them. I'll have to get the finger out and get a video done on how to fully assemble and paint them and do a tutorial on them. And I'm going to experiment a bit more. First of all, I'm going to try out my little artillery shell idea, and maybe I might hide some magnets in some plastic mix for doing explosions. But I'll muck around. I'll try different bits and pieces, see what I like the look of, and experiment and have fun. That's the important thing, sort of have fun with it. But there we go. That's our smoke done today. Oh, thankfully, Sci-Fi has said it's passable, so that's all that matters. It's on the list, and the worst thing that happens is you get shirts more. Yeah, look, it looks awesome. Cheers, thank you. I was surprised with this one. I'm gonna have to make another one, a couple more of these. This one looks the part. That sort of starfish explosion. That looks good. I'll have another bash at them. And then I like that sitting the turret on top then. Obviously that's not finished, but it's like boom. Bang, and the tank is gone. So there we are, folks. Thank you for joining me for another hobby hangout. Hopefully you've learned something, or maybe you're inspired to do some like clump foliage stuff yourself, messing around. I'm gonna have a crack at mucking about with some Storm Boys or some mix and do some missile packs, and I'm having fun with it at the moment. So you're nearly guaranteed to see some more clump foliage in the future. Some more smoke markers, some more explosions, some rockets being fired, some jump jets being ignited, and Storm Boys jump packs being lit off. I'll be mucking around with all of them. A half down with a starfish coming out will look good, maybe. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. A half down with a starfish. I left that one flat specifically. So this one, I left that flat intentionally so that the turret could be sat on top. But yeah, for a general explosion, I would have, ideally, if I was doing a general explosion, I'd have more of the explosion sort of coming out in this direction as well. But my thinking when I was making that one specifically for exploding tanks was that you would sit the turret on top of it again, hence it being flat. But yeah, there you go. Thanks for joining. Hit the like button, it helps with the algorithms, and if you're not subscribed, you're not missing out on much, don't worry. But thanks for joining, folks. It was fun. I've enjoyed making another one. Hopefully you've been inspired to do a bit of hobby, or you've gotten a bit of hobby done yourself. And we'll catch you in the next one. And take it easy, guys. Good night.